finished leg back up on itself. Fold out this top leg, and all I do is lay the one that I've already cut on top of this one. So I've laid the one I cut off the bottom leg on top of this top leg. Take time to make sure things are flat and even, and then you have a cutting guide. Okay, there's our excess cut off. On suits, I usually save those in case there's ever a hole and patching or darning that needs to be done. So we have our two legs that are exactly even. Now it's on to the sewing. When we have our pressed, folded in hems, we're now ready to sew. The first step is to turn the slacks inside out. One leg, two legs. And then take a leg, and I like to put a straight pin on each of the seams. Even though you have your nice crease, it keeps things nice and stable, and it keeps you on track. So I've pinned at the two seams, and then at the front crease and at the back crease. Now, it is significant that I put the pins down, because the way I'm going to show you to hem today is not your traditional hemming method. Traditional hemming methods would have the thread running right along the top edge. But I've found through the years, actually it was my mother, that men's toes tend to stick in that top seam and rip the hem. And so she devised a method of hemming down just a little ways from the top edge. And that way when their feet, if you do it the way I show you, when their feet go into the leg, it's going to hit that hem and, if anything, roll down, and then their foot will come out the opening.
Cool.
So I've threaded a needle, and for hemming you always want to use a single thread. And by that I mean you thread your needle and you pull your thread through, and you take only one of them. One. So I've threaded a needle, and with pants you never want to use doubled thread. And those of you who sew know what that means. Those of you who don't, it means that you want only one length of thread going through your pants. To achieve that, you thread your needle and you pull one side of the string out longer than the other. And when you come to the end of your long side of your thread, just roll it around your pointer finger, like so, and take your thumb and roll it off the edge, then grasp it and pull it, and you have a nice knot. I'll do that again. Roll it around your pointer finger, and then taking your thumb, roll it off your finger, grasp it between the nail of your thumb and your finger and pull, and it gives you a nice knot. So now we're ready to sew. I always start at a seam when I'm hemming trousers. So I'm going to take my first stitch on this seam allowance here, and on the seam allowance I'm going to get a pretty good chunk of fabric, and I'm going to roll the hem that we pinned down about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm putting my needle in the seam allowance, taking a good chunk of fabric with the needle, and then grabbing where I've rolled the hem piece. Okay, I'm going to do it again. A good chunk of the seam allowance and into the rolled hem. And this is just a basic whip stitch. All the way around the pant leg, I'm going to keep this little piece of the hem rolled down about 1/4 of an inch. Now when you're off the seam allowance onto the actual leg of the trouser, you want to take care to pick up 1 or 2 threads at most with your needle of the trouser. It doesn't matter how much you pick up of the rolled hem, but of the trouser you want to pick up 1 or 2 threads. So I've picked up my 1 thread, and now I'm going through the trouser and pulling to the end. Again, I'm going to come about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to pick up 1 thread and then into my rolled hem. Pull. Again, about 1/4 of an inch, 1 thread, and into my hem. And so I'm just continuing around the leg of the trouser, taking about 1/4 inch stitches, picking up a thread, going through the hem, a thread of the trouser, and all the way through that hem that we have rolled back about 1/4 of an inch, and pulling. Move just a little bit, picking up 1 thread, and through the trouser, picking up 1 thread and through the trouser. And I'm going to do that all the way around both legs. And this is how it looks when you fold back the hem that you have rolled. See? And on the top side, you don't even see the stitches. And if you do see them at all when you press them, they absolutely disappear. That's why you only want to pick up 1 or 2 threads of your actual trouser fabric. Okay, to the back, rolling my hem down about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm moving around the trouser leg 1/4 of an inch at a time, picking up 1 or 2 threads from the trouser and going through our rolled hem. 1 or 2 threads of the trouser going through our rolled hem.
Great.
As you can see now, I've finished half of a pant leg and I'm at the opposite seam. Again, here at the seam, I'm going to pick up a big chunk of the fabric because this helps to make it stronger. I'm not going to just get a thread or 2. I'm getting a big chunk and a big chunk and going through the hem. So I'm at the seam and I'm doing big chunks of a big chunk with my needle of that seam allowance and going through to the hem. And the reason I do that is because you don't see the seam allowance on the top anyway, and by grabbing a bigger piece it strengthens your hem. Okay. Another thing that I need to point out is that some pant legs are very tapered. And by that I mean they start big at the top, and as they get down towards the hem, they get smaller. Well, if that's the case, then when you cut it and turn it up, sometimes your hem isn't quite as big as what you're sewing to. When that happens, you separate it at the seam line, and I've had to separate it that much just so that I could keep the hem piece nice and flat with my trouser so that you don't have gaps on the front of the trousers when you're finished. As you can see, we've come all the way around our first trouser leg and we're back almost where we started. So I'm going to go in 1/4 of an inch, pick up 1 thread and go through, pull. Now I'm back to that seam allowance, so I'm going to get a nice big chunk and through the hem. But this time I'm going to knot as I sew. So we're back at that seam allowance, and I've taken a big chunk of the seam allowance and through the hem, but I'm not going to pull it all the way down yet because I want to knot as I do, because we're closing off our trouser leg. And I'm going to go ahead all the way across that seam allowance, taking a big chunk, going through the hem, and then knotting, because I want this hem to last. All the way across, pulling through, and then knotting. And we're done. The first trouser leg is done, and you do what you did again, and your trousers are hemmed. Then we press. So when we've hemmed both of our legs, we remove our pins and turn the pants back right side out. Lay them flat on your ironing board, and this time you need a heavy, damp press cloth. A washcloth works really well. Just wet it and wring it out good, and then lay it over your newly sewn hem. And you want to just really let the iron sit there and press it good. Really, professional pressing is a large component of professional sewing. Hemming, alterations, sewing a garment from scratch. So you're just really going to press it good. Turn it over. Do the same thing to the other side of the leg. You want an invisible hem. If your pants are light, you can. And there you are. You've just earned $11. And your pants are finished.